Hi, everyone. Unfortunately, due to the snow day, we're going to have to do this mini lecture and a couple of review activities today, and then we'll review everything tomorrow prior to hopping into our mini DBQ activity type deal. So today we're talking about imperialism, and specifically we call this new imperialism, old imperialism being the imperialism of the age of exploration. But you're going to see a lot of similarities between the two of them. They're going to share a lot of themes. The economic policies are going to be similar as well. First thing I'd like you to do is make sure that you write at least 10 lines. What does the balance of power in Europe look like in the late 1800s? And you can use your notes to help you to do this. We're not going to do this timed, but I am going to give you a point credit for doing it. It'll give you a nice little review to have before moving into the late 1800s and how that balance of power is going to shift immediately following the Franco-Prussian War and then the Berlin Conference that we'll get to today. First thing, we're going to come back to this image tomorrow. We're going to do some artistic analysis of this picture, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Other images coming from this time period, I really enjoy this one. This is the one that you may have seen hanging up above my desk at school. Imperialism, dictionary definition, extending power by gaining power through economic or military force. It's colonization, it's the gaining of currency, it's using mercantilist policies, the idea of controlling as many places as possible. It's the giant game of risk. It's clash of empires. These things are all tied together in imperialism. There's a short, quick video, the idea of the economics of imperialism. I think we've seen this before, but if you want to check the video out again about mercantilism, hits some of the major themes of mercantilism as an economic policy. Remember that we're moving towards capitalism, but there's almost a backlash against it as we move away from the conservatism of Metternich, where you start to see these countries isolate and say, wait a minute, I can take advantage of this particular market by making sure that I concentrate on my own domestic economic policies. So you start to see a little bit of protectionism come in. We saw that in the last chapter as well. Mercantilism, another word for economic imperialism. That's basically what it is. We saw it in the age of exploration, and we see it again here. You own most of the stuff, you win the game. We talked briefly about nationalism already. You saw that with Ernest Renan in his speech, the Frenchman. We can see that nationalism lead to imperialism. If the idea of being the best or having pride in your nation is there, then it's easy to say, okay, we need to continue to expand because everybody else is, and we need to gain the upper hand in this scenario. So there's really an element of pride to the new imperialism of the late 1800s. We also saw how nationalism can lead to negative effects of social Darwinism, the idea of survival of the fittest. We see ties to racism during new imperialism, the idea that, oh, hey, these people are lesser, only the strong survive, then it only follows suit that we should be able to take them over. It's not doing anything that's immoral because according to social Darwinism, this is what happens in the real world. There's a great quote here. I'm just going to read it aloud. The path of progress is strewn with the wrecks of nations. Traces are everywhere to be seen of the slaughtered remains of inferior races. Yet these dead people are, in very truth, the stepping stones on which mankind has arisen to the higher intellectual and deeper emotional life of today. Wow is kind of what comes to mind here. Literally, if you can put the visual in your mind of actually stepping on the people deemed to be lesser as these societies are advancing through new imperialism, that is such a dangerous mindset to have when we start looking at differences as inequality. And that's really what's going on during this time period. It's used as a justification for many of these nations and the people of those nations. Also, we'll see this concept of for the greater good. Well, they're lesser, so we're helping them by conquering them and showing them the European way, which is in fact superior to theirs because we say it is. Very Harry Potter-esque, for the greater good. Well, these races are lesser than wizards, and so therefore it's only natural that we use them as literal stepping stones, as we see in the statue in the later books there. We're going to get to this concept of white man's burden tomorrow in class, and we'll start to take a look at the idea through some poetry as well. The idea that it is the white man's responsibility to help these lesser races become better through our superior means and superior ideas. There are going to be battles over imperialism. Here's a nice little map of Asia to help us with that. In China, we call them spheres of influence. That term pops up here, where basically, to boil it down very, very simply, you have like exclusive trading rights within different regions of China. That eventually leads to the Boxer Rebellion. Make sure you take a peek at some of the information there on the Boxer Rebellion in your textbook. In India, again, when Great Britain loses the Americas as colonies, or the 13 colonies in what would become the United States of America, they lose a lot of economic power. They lose it, especially from a raw material standpoint. So they need to go somewhere else to find it. That somewhere else is going to end up being India. And we talked briefly about how the Indian economy is stunted by this. India was kind of rolling right along in terms of becoming industrialized. But Britain says, wait, we don't need you to industrialize. We got that covered up here. We need you to feed us. And so as a result, they really stunt the Indian economy. And that folds into this whole thing as well. We have what's known as the Sepoy Rebellion, or the First War for Indian Independence, depending upon which perspective you take in all of this. Lord Kitchener, who's going to be one of the major figures in all of this, it is this consciousness of the inherent superiority of the European which has won for us India. However well educated and clever a native might be, and however brave he may prove himself, I believe that no rank we can bestow on him would cause him to be considered an equal of the British officer. These quotes make you want to vomit now, or at least they should. This concept, again, that different means unequal. But it's the elements of social Darwinism and nationalism taking a turn towards negative town that is really allowing these people to justify these ideas. Then we get to Africa, and that's where we're going to concentrate a lot in the next couple of days here, because it's the Dutch, the British, the Germans, the French, the Portuguese, and the Belgians especially. They're going to be kind of the leaders in all of this, and Italy, LOL, because it doesn't really work out for them. Berlin Conference, 1884, 1885, led by the notorious OVB. We see him come back. It's basically the carving up of Africa is the best way to describe it. They kind of decide, hey, instead of fighting each other over these lands, let's just separate and divvy them up now. It takes a special kind of gall to say, it's similar to the Treaty of Tordesillas, where they're dividing the world in half between Spain and Portugal. Similar concept here. Like, it takes a special kind of guts to say, well, we're going to take these lands over regardless. So it's really just deciding who gets what. Meanwhile, there are people and civilizations living on those lands already. Shout out to Liberia and Ethiopia, the only two places that are not fully taken over by European nations during this new imperialism. Liberia, because of its ties to the United States. Just interesting fact, Liberia's capital of Monrovia is the only other world capital besides Washington, D.C. to be named after a U.S. president. And it's because when slaves, to a degree, it becomes a kind of a slave, I don't even know what I want to call it, like a slaver colony almost, but with ties to the United States. And because of that, we see the European nations don't enter in there. And then Ethiopia fights off Italy because, again, Italy's like, oh, we want to be at the big kids table. We want to play with the big boys. And they really are unable to do so. We're not going to complete this particular map. I think that geographically, if you want to do it, absolutely, I'll post it. But it's not something that we need to do, especially because we've had kind of some little point value things. The Valentine kind of took the place of this for me. We're going to get to, I love this image over here. We're going to get to this idea tomorrow to analyze the maps, but really this is the map you want to concern yourself with. You can take a look there and see exactly how it's divided up, see what nations are where, because that's going to be really, really important for our mini DBQ that we'll take a look at tomorrow. Here's another map that does very, very similar things. You can pause this and take some time to take a look through and see, because what we end up seeing is a lot of influence by these European nations, even today, in these various nations of Africa. All right, so that's where I'm going to stop for today. Please make sure that you're going through your textbook, going through especially 24.2, but now starting to make your way into 24.3 as well. Please let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.